What's going on, everybody? Trey here, and we're going to talk some Lions versus Commanders divisional playoff round. Um, Lions would ultimately end up losing this game at home 45-31. So, two touchdowns. This was probably the most surprising outcome of the weekend, I think. Um, did not expect a Commanders win. Did not expect a Commanders win by such a margin either. Um, and man, what do we even say about Jared Goff's quarterback play, right? If, I thought before this game started that the key was going to be how well each quarterback could play. And yeah, Jared Goff, three interceptions, one for a pick six, gave up a sack fumble that the Commanders would ultimately recover. So that's four turnovers just from your quarterback right there. You're not in a position to win a game. And then they give up one more interception on a Jamison Williams interception on a trick play, right? So we're talking five turnovers in a game that came down to right two possessions. So if they just convert on two of those five where they turn the ball over, different ball game. But that's not that right. That's not the way it goes. What worked? Well, for the Commanders, right, that run pass option worked so well. That is the triple option, right? So they've got the option to run the ball with Eckler or Jaden Daniels, or they could even put it into Brian Robinson's hands. He had 15 carries for 77 yards and two touchdowns. Right. So, I mean, just for whatever reason, the Lions couldn't figure it out, right? And as good as Aaron Glenn is as a defensive coordinator, they just the Commanders just had their number, right? We're talking, it was just play after play. I mean, the Commanders just looked so unstoppable against a team that I think everybody thought was the best in the NFL this season, right? Maybe not best record-wise after the Chiefs, but they look like probably one of the most complete teams in terms of how they played, how they won. So this one was just I was shocked, honestly. And I think that the Lions were too. Like I said, they were stunned in Detroit. So let's just quarterback breakdown, right? Quarterback stats here. Jared Goff, 313 in the air. Jaden Daniels, 299. So pretty close there. Jared Goff, 23 for 40. They passed the ball a ton. And I'll talk more about that. Jaden Daniels, 23 for 31. As I mentioned, Jared Goff, one touchdown, but three picks. Jaden Daniels, two touchdowns, no interceptions. Goff, surprisingly was only sacked twice, which it felt like, I mean, he was under a lot of pressure from that Commanders defense, but, he only took two sacks for 16 yards. It just felt like, from how the game went, that he was sacked so much more often. But Goff only 7 yards on the ground. That's expected, right? He's not a runner. Runs when he needs to, and it's an absolute necessity. Jaden Daniels, 51 yards on the ground, probably a little bit under what he usually does. But, I mean, everything was working for them, so there was no real reason for him to run the ball as much as we've seen in past games. Goff, one fumble, and he lost it. Jaden Daniels, none. De'Ami Brown did fumble the ball for the Commanders, but he didn't lose it, so they didn't have any turnovers this game, which was exactly what they needed to do against a very greedy Lions defense. Now, red zone conversions. Lions 3 for 6, Jaden Daniels and the Commanders 4 for 4. Right? Exactly what you need to do on the road. Every time you get the ball into that red zone, you need to be scoring points. You need to be putting it in the end zone. And they did it. And they did it. 100% of the time, they scored a touchdown. The Lions, on the other hand, only 50% of the time, and that's with turning the ball over 5 times. Right? So the opportunities were there. 50% red zone conversion and 5 turnovers. They had a chance. Even with shooting themselves in the foot, they had a chance. But, when you repeatedly stack those mistakes up at very poor timing, right? There's not, you're handcuffing yourself at that point. So the Lions threw the ball 40 times. But, I don't understand. I don't understand why they felt the need to rely on that so much throughout the game, especially when Jahmyr Gibbs had 102 yards, 2 touchdowns on just 14 carries. Right? He didn't even get 20 carries, and he was able to crack 100 yards and score 2 touchdowns. Lions would ultimately rush for 201 yards total. So even when they hand the ball off to their receivers, et cetera, right? Like that was working too. They got another 100 yards through that, or just about, right? Maybe a little under. So, you know, I understand the need to keep the confidence in your quarterback and to make sure that he stays integrated in the offensive flow. But if if he's turning the ball over and you need to get some momentum back, why not run the ball when it was working? Right? And yeah, the offensive play ultimately cost the Lions. Um, the Commanders, right, at Jaden Daniels 299 yards, they also ran the ball really well by committee, right? Brian Robinson 77 yards, 2 touchdowns. Eckler 51 yards, Jaden Daniels 51 yards, 182 yards total. The Lions averaged 8.7 rush yards per play compared to 4.3 for the Commanders, right? So that's all the more reason, as I mentioned, that the Lions should have stuck with the run. But I understand the field, the need to move it, score quickly, get it down the field. But in a game that only came down to 2 possessions, right? The difference is marginal, right? I understand that it wasn't a close game in terms of score, but it could have been had they managed the game better from a coaching perspective, from an offensive play calling perspective, in my opinion, right? But again, 5 turnovers altogether. It's no way to win a playoff game. You're putting yourself on the back foot and never really giving yourself an opportunity. You're asking way too much of your defense that was already up against it with a very potent offensive attack from the Commanders. So, I'm impressed, right, with this Commanders team, what they've done on both sides of the ball, how quickly they've turned the franchise around, it seems, right? Just last year, I think they only won 4 games, and now they're in the NFC Championship game with a rookie quarterback at that. So, I think it's incredibly promising, regardless of what happens from here on out for the Commanders. It's incredibly promising for that team, and I think at least for the next, as long as Jaden Daniels is there, that they're going to be a contender, right? They're no longer a doormat team. They are now a contender that you have to take seriously every year. And I think Jaden Daniels and this team will only get better. So I'm really excited to see what they'll do in that NFC Championship game against the Eagles this weekend.